What happened when an undercover CEO discovered that his star employee was stealing a young intern's groundbreaking idea and passing it off as his own? This isn't just a story about betrayal in the workplace. It's a powerful journey of justice, courage, and redemption. You're about to witness how one quiet whistleblower, one stolen prototype, and one CEO in disguise changed an entire company from the inside out. Stay with us, because what unfolds next will challenge everything you thought you knew about leadership, loyalty, and the price of silence. Late-night light from Isla Moreno's laptop painted the walls of her compact Barcelona apartment in a soft turquoise hue, flickering between CAD renders and system logs. Outside, the distant hum of scooters and late-night buses echoed through the Gothic alleyways. But inside her studio, silence reigned, except for the dull thud of her pulse pounding in her ears. She reread Sofia Vega's email for the third time, her heart sinking lower each time her eyes scanned the words. He presented it as his own. Isla leaned back in her chair, the weight of the day pressing heavily on her chest. Just hours earlier at the Gaia project pitch, she had watched Julian Torres, the firm's charismatic design director, unveil a brilliant AI-enhanced interface, one she recognized almost instantly. It wasn't his, it was Sofia's. The idea, the architecture, even the color palette, they had all come from late-night brainstorming sessions between Isla and Sofia back when the intern was still refining her concept. Sofia's brilliance had shone through every detail. But now Julian had hijacked the credit, and Sofia's stunned expression during the presentation haunted Isla. She wanted to speak up, to demand justice, but doubt gnawed at her. Julian was well-loved, respected. Isla was the quiet junior sustainability architect known more for her eco-concepts than confrontation. And Sofia? Just an intern. Would anyone even listen? Still, that email had changed everything. As Isla stared at her screen, her cursor hovering over Mateo Alvarez's contact info, one thought pulsed louder than all the rest. If I stay silent, I'm complicit. The memory of the morning meeting unfolded in Isla's mind with painful clarity. The presentation had taken place in Formnest Studios' sleek, glass-walled conference room, sunlight streaming in as Julian Torres stood confidently before the assembled design team. Project Gaia was being reintroduced with flair, pitched as a game-changer in sustainable architecture, an AI-powered interface capable of anticipating environmental challenges in the early design phase. Julian spoke with the authority of a visionary, weaving technical jargon with charming anecdotes, his voice commanding, his manner polished. The team hung on to every word, nodding along as he demonstrated the interface's predictive capabilities and seamless user flow. But as Isla watched, a pit formed in her stomach. The prototype on display wasn't new. It was eerily familiar. The interface, the logic, the adaptive rendering techniques, it all mirrored what Sofia Vega had once enthusiastically described during a quiet lunch in the courtyard just a few weeks prior. Isla remembered how the young intern's eyes had lit up as she explained the concept. Using generative AI to simulate site responses based on user-defined constraints. Isla had even offered debugging help when Sofia got stuck on the environmental overlay integration. Yet here it was, being paraded as Julian's latest innovation. Isla's gaze had drifted to Sofia across the table, her face pale, her lips slightly parted in stunned disbelief. She didn't say a word, but her heartbreak was visible in the way her hands trembled slightly over her notebook. The presentation ended in applause, with Julian soaking in the praise, while Sofia shrank into her seat. Isla had clapped too, reluctantly, the sound hollow in her ears. She hadn't spoken up then, but guilt now clung to her like smoke, suffocating and inescapable. That wasn't Julian's vision, it was Sofia's, and it had just been stolen in plain sight. That night, the weight of silence became too much for Isla to bear. She paced the length of her apartment, the wooden floor creaking softly beneath her bare feet as the city hummed outside. Every time she considered letting it go, Sofia's expression during the presentation flashed before her eyes, that gut-punched stillness, the unspoken betrayal. Isla sat down at her desk once more, her fingers trembling as she hovered over the contact info for Mateo Alvarez, Formnest Studios' elusive CEO. Known for his commitment to innovation and ethics, Matteo was rarely involved in day-to-day design reviews. But Isla had met him once at a firm retreat, quiet, sharp-eyed, with a habit of remembering interns' names. She hoped that version of him still existed. With a deep breath, she tapped the call icon. The line rang 3 times before a groggy voice answered. "Matteo Alvarez," he said, clipped but alert. "Mr. Alvarez?" "Hi, it's Isla Moreno. I'm on the Gaia project. I wouldn't be calling if it wasn't urgent." There was a pause. "Go ahead." Isla swallowed hard. "I believe Julian Torres presented a prototype today that doesn't belong to him. It was developed by Sofia Vega, our intern." Silence, she rushed on, outlining the timeline, Julian's probing questions during early drafts, and Sofia's emotional collapse after the presentation. Matteo's voice, when he finally spoke, was measured, skeptical. "Julian's been with us for years." "You're sure?" Isla closed her eyes. "Yes, I saw it unfold. And this isn't the first whisper I've heard." Another pause, deeper now. "Thank you for telling me," he said at last. "Leave this with me, but say nothing further for now." As the line disconnected, Isla exhaled sharply. She had spoken the truth, but in doing so, she might have lit a match in a room filled with gas. By sunrise, Matteo Alvarez was no longer the CEO of Formnest Studios, at least not publicly. Within hours of Isla's call, he enacted a plan he'd long considered but never dared to implement: going undercover. Operating under the alias Luis Duran, a freelance 3D modeler from Valencia, he submitted a remote contractor profile through a third-party agency, the firm occasionally used for overflow design work. He assigned himself to Project Gaia's production files, under the guise of assisting with visual rendering support. Within the digital workspace, his presence triggered only a few nonchalant welcomes. No one recognized him. The beard in his profile picture, the altered name, the quiet demeanor, it all worked. During his first team video call, he sat silently, observing. Julian, ever commanding, steered the meeting with performative enthusiasm. "Luis," he boomed, "welcome aboard. We're glad to have you. We're finalizing the visual shell and could use a pair of fresh eyes." Matteo smiled politely, offering a standard, "happy to contribute." As introductions continued, Matteo's gaze landed on Sofia, tucked into the corner of the screen, camera angled slightly upward, her voice nearly inaudible when she answered a roll call question. She looked exhausted, defeated. Not once was her name mentioned in relation to the project's breakthrough AI tool. Matteo's stomach turned. The meetings progressed quickly, technical jargon flying, timelines compressed, Julian effortlessly dominating the conversation, but Matteo watched closely. The way Sofia winced when interrupted, the way Renata Cruz, the project manager, never made eye contact when scheduling. Something was deeply wrong. That night, in his temporary apartment, Matteo, still wearing the mask of Luis, began combing through the codebase. Within minutes, he stumbled upon an archived wireframe labeled SGV_initial_UI_V2. He opened it. The elegance of the architecture stunned him. It was like finding fingerprints on a stolen sculpture. Sofia's brilliance wasn't gone. It had just been buried. Matteo stared at the wireframe on his screen, heart pounding beneath the calm facade of Luis Duran. What he had just unearthed was far more than competent work. It was visionary. The interface design Sofia Vega had created wasn't just functional, it was intuitive, responsive, and startlingly elegant. Lines of code flowed with precision, predictive algorithms tailored to environmental responsiveness were embedded like hidden veins through the project. This was no rough draft, it was a masterstroke, and yet it had been tucked away in an obsolete archive, discarded without reference or attribution. Matteo ran simulations using her version and compared it with the final version Julian had proudly showcased during the Gaia pitch. The contrast was jarring. Sofia's design was fluid, clean, and adaptive. Julian's had stripped away that beauty, replacing it with clunky menus and generic placeholders, design choices that dulled the very innovation the project claimed to champion. The more Matteo examined, the more certain he became. Julian hadn't improved Sofia's work, he had diluted it. Late into the night, Matteo dug deeper. He discovered comments in the margins of Sofia's code, thoughtful annotations, notes about user accessibility, environmental load forecasting, even interface adaptability for differently abled users. Her mind had anticipated challenges the current design team hadn't even discussed. It was rare to see this level of refinement from an intern or even a seasoned architect. This wasn't just a good idea, it was a potential industry standard. Matteo sat back, exhaling slowly. He could no longer pretend this was a misunderstanding or a mentoring mishap. Sofia Vega's work had been hijacked, deliberately, systematically, and hidden beneath Julian's polished bravado. But now, with undeniable proof at his fingertips, Matteo knew the next step was no longer about observation. It was about justice. And justice required action. Over the next few days, Matteo, still operating as Luis, began to see the full extent of the rot beneath Formnest's pristine exterior. It wasn't just a single act of plagiarism, it was a pattern, a quiet sabotage that chipped away at Sofia's presence within the Gaia project. He watched as her tasks were subtly reassigned, her calendar slowly drained of meaning. She was excluded from the Gaia Phase 2 kickoff entirely, her name nowhere on the invite list, despite the fact that the phase built directly upon her earlier concepts. When Luis casually brought it up in a virtual chat with Renata Cruz, the project manager, she froze, then deflected with a rushed explanation. "Julian sent the list, I just organized it." Her fingers tapped nervously on her desk, eyes darting off camera. The team, though outwardly collaborative, tiptoed around him, their compliance cloaked in smiles and nods. Even private chats revealed nothing, only professional courtesy, guarded replies, and subtle fear. Matteo recognized this culture all too well. Protect the high performers no matter the cost. It was systemic, a quiet machinery that elevated appearance over substance. Sofia wasn't just being ignored, she was being erased. And Julian had perfected the art of making it look procedural. Matteo's jaw clenched as he watched it all unfold. Justice would take more than confronting a thief. It would mean dismantling a structure built to reward theft in plain sight. The truth was festering beneath the firm's polished surface. One evening, after another stifling team call where Sofia's ideas were talked over and her input dismissed, Matteo sent a discreet message to Isla asking to meet in person. They rendezvoused at a quiet cafe tucked between the Gothic Quarter's shadowed alleys where the scent of espresso hung thick in the air. Isla looked tense, her fingers wrapped tightly around a lukewarm cup. "It's worse than I thought," she confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. "This isn't the first time I've seen ideas vanish into Julian's hands. Just the first time I've been brave enough to speak." Matteo nodded, urging her to go on. "People don't report it because nothing changes. The interns leave, the projects move on, and Julian keeps winning." The next day, under the guise of a chance coffee machine encounter, Luis struck up a conversation with Sofia. Her eyes were heavy with exhaustion, her smile faint but polite. "You did brilliant work on Gaia," he offered. She blinked, caught off guard, then gave a hollow laugh. "Not brilliant enough to keep my name on it, apparently." As they spoke in hushed tones near the back of the office, the wall seemed to absorb her frustration. "I can't speak up, I'm just an intern, and Julian already said my ideas were too experimental. He said I didn't understand the market." Her words wavered, but beneath them, Matteo heard the spark of brilliance muffled by fear. He assured her softly, "You're not imagining this. You're not alone." Sofia met his gaze, hesitant but searching for hope. In that moment, something shifted. It wasn't just about stolen code or forgotten credit anymore. It was about resilience, about fighting for space in a system designed to erase people like her. And now Matteo wasn't just investigating, he was invested. The betrayal arrived in Matteo's inbox with the sterile precision of legal formatting. An email from the firm's legal department confirming a provisional patent application for the Gaia interface, filed under one name, Julian Torres. The subject line alone made Matteo's stomach twist. But the attached documentation was worse. The abstract described the AI-assisted design tool in exact terms Matteo had seen buried in Sofia's early files. Her neural mapping methodology, her adaptive layout generator, even the distinct color schemes she had agonized over for weeks. The schematics were hers, the logic was hers, and now it was legally his. Matteo felt his pulse quicken as he opened Sophia's archived files again, comparing timestamps, design iterations, and the detailed annotations she'd left. Every line of evidence screamed ownership. There was no mistaking it. Julian had stolen not just the idea, but the future it represented. Worse still, if left unchallenged, this patent would prevent Sophia from ever legally using or profiting from her own innovation. This was more than corporate theft. It was erasure on a structural level. Matteo sat back in his chair, breathing shallowly, staring at the name Julian Torres beside Inventor, like a bruise across a masterpiece. The irony was unbearable. Sophia hadn't just been sidelined, she had been silenced. Her brilliance converted into leverage for someone else's glory. Matteo knew now that observation wasn't enough. He drafted a carefully worded email to Formnest's executive legal counsel, outlining the discrepancies and including metadata, screenshots, and side-by-side comparisons. He deliberately avoided accusations, instead requesting a technical audit, but beneath the formality, his rage simmered. This wasn't just a breach of ethics. It was an attack on the values Formnest claimed to uphold. And if Julian thought he could hide behind a polished slide deck and a lawyer's signature, he was about to be very, very wrong. The tension in the Formnest Studios auditorium was electric as staff filled the rows, awaiting Julian Torres's much-hyped unveiling of Gaia's next phase. The lights dimmed, and Julian strode confidently onto the stage, clad in a designer suit, every inch the celebrated innovator. A massive slide of Gaia's interface flickered to life behind him in calming blues and greens. Sophia's colors, her vision, rendered without credit. Imagine, Julian boomed, a future where our buildings respond before we even speak. Applause rippled through the room. At the back, Matteo, still dressed in his Louise Duran contractor attire, watched silently. When Julian opened the floor for questions, a single voice rang out, calm but commanding. "I believe a correction is needed." Heads turned. Matteo stepped forward. "My name is Matteo Alvarez. I am this company's CEO." The room fell into stunned silence. Julian froze, color draining from his face as Matteo ascended the steps. With a firm hand, he tapped the projector remote. A new slide replaced Julian's design, metadata, file names, and time-stamped logs, all pointing to one source, Sofia Vega. This, Matteo said, was not Julian Torres' invention, it was Sofia's. Every architectural layer, every predictive sequence, her intellectual property. A low murmur spread through the crowd. On the screen, a side-by-side comparison appeared. Julian's finalized presentation and Sofia's original prototype. The differences were superficial. The foundation was unmistakably hers. Renata Cruz, seated near the front, shifted uncomfortably. "We have emails, meeting recordings, and system logs," Matteo continued, his voice unshakable. "This was not an oversight, this was theft." He turned to Julian. "Your actions were unethical and effective immediately. You are terminated. Security will escort you out." Gasps broke through the stunned quiet as two guards stepped forward. Julian stammered, but words failed him. He cast a final, venomous look toward Sophia, who sat frozen in disbelief, then turned and left. Matteo faced the team once more. "From this day forward, credit will be given where it's due. We will no longer tolerate a culture of silence and appropriation." He looked directly at Sophia. "Talent like yours deserves not only recognition, but protection." Applause erupted, thunderous, long overdue. Sophia blinked back tears. For the first time, the room finally saw her, not as an intern, not as a background, but as the visionary she had always been. Weeks had passed since the confrontation, but the ripple effects were still transforming Formnest Studios from the inside out. Where once silence reigned and credits were quietly reassigned, there now stood an open concept innovation lab, alive with whiteboards, rapid prototyping stations, and the soft hum of collaborative energy. At the center of it all stood Sofia Vega, no longer just an intern but the newly appointed head of experimental design. She moved through the space with quiet authority, offering feedback, asking bold questions, and most importantly, listening. Her vision had not only reshaped Gaia but the company's culture itself. Nearby, Isla Moreno, now leading the firm's Ethics and Integrity Task Force, smiled as she watched a new generation of interns sketch wild, daring ideas without fear of being silenced. Across the firm, a new credits-based IP policy was implemented, ensuring that contributions, big or small, were publicly acknowledged and fairly compensated. Meanwhile, Matteo remained a steady, guiding presence, still CEO but more visible and more vocal than ever. He often quoted what had now become an internal mantra: "If we're not lifting voices, we're not leading." One crisp evening over drinks at a cozy rooftop cafe, Sophia raised her glass to Isla. "I still can't believe it sometimes," she said with a soft laugh. "I almost gave up." Isla clinked her glass in return, her eyes full of warmth. "But you didn't. You changed the game." And, under the soft glow of Barcelona's city lights, they toasted to something rarer than genius: a system finally built to protect it. The story of Sofia Vega and Formnest Studios teaches a powerful lesson about integrity, courage, and the transformative impact of standing up for what's right. It reveals how toxic workplace cultures often protect charisma over character, silencing innovation in favor of hierarchy. Yet it also shows that change begins when one person dares to speak out, when someone like Isla refuses to stay silent, even when the odds are stacked against her. Sofia's stolen idea could have been lost forever, but through quiet bravery, strategic action, and a CEO willing to see past appearances, justice prevailed. More importantly, the story underscores the importance of creating systems that recognize and protect intellectual contributions at every level, not just those at the top. True leadership, as Matteo learns, isn't just about managing success. It's about listening, acting ethically, and ensuring that every voice, especially those most often overlooked, is heard and valued. In a world where talent can be buried under ego, this story reminds us that the most powerful innovation comes not just from brilliant minds, but from environments that foster them. When we choose integrity over image, we don't just save one career, we build a foundation for a better future.